When I fell for the heiress of the Monroe family, I was just a scholarship kid, so broke I felt like I was tarnishing her just by picking up a book she dropped. Over 5 years, I fought like hell, finally earning a spot on the cover of Forbes, only to get a call from her on the day of the interview. "Can I borrow some money?" When I found her, the girl who was once a diamond was working the graveyard shift at a 7-Eleven, pale and thin, but forcing a brave face. My eyes burning, I pulled out every bank card I own, my entire net worth, but she took a step back. "I'm not good enough for you anymore." I yanked her into my arms, my voice thick with emotion. "You idiot. The only reason I worked this hard was so that no matter what, rich or poor, I could hold you without a second thought." The heavy spine of international business law slipped from her grasp, hitting the old but polished hardwood floor of the library with a dull thud that kicked up a few dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun. Almost on instinct, I dropped into a crouch to get it. But the moment my fingers brushed the hardcover, my heart seized. The book was brand new, its gold leaf title practically glowing with privilege. My fingertips, on the other hand, were still stained with black grease from the lab that morning, a faint gray shadow stubbornly clinging under my nails no matter how hard I scrubbed. Tarnished. The word was a tiny splinter, lodging itself in the most insecure corner of my soul. Even picking up a book for her fell out of place, like I was trespassing. "Thank you." Her voice drifted down from above me, as cool and clear as a mountain stream, perfectly level. It was basic courtesy, nothing more. In a flustered rush, I pushed the book back in her arms, never daring to look up. My entire field of vision was filled by the hem of her tailored, cream-colored cashmere dress, a pair of immaculate white flats, and a sliver of an ankle so pale it was almost blinding. She took the book without a second glance and turned, the heavy stack of legal text cradled in her arms. Her footsteps faded away, leaving behind the faintest scent. Not perfume, but something like expensive soap mixed with sunshine. I stayed frozen on the floor until the scent was completely gone, then slowly pushed myself up. My palm was slick with sweat. A few guys nearby were snickering, their laughter thick with insinuation. I knew what they were laughing at. My awkwardness. My hopeless ambition. Ava Monroe, the top student at Stanford Law, heiress to the Monroe corporate empire. And me, Caleb Stone, a scholarship kid who could only stay at this elite university thanks to student loans and a never-ending string of part-time jobs. We were worlds apart. After that humiliating library encounter, I became obsessed. Every rational part of my brain told me to stay away, but the image of her, that one brief moment, was burned into my mind. I started unconsciously gathering information about her. I learned she spent every Wednesday afternoon in the open-air reading room on the library's top floor, without fail. I learned she loved the mango milk crepe cake from the expensive bakery near the north gate of campus, but rarely bought it, saying she had to watch her figure. I learned that beneath her cool exterior, she'd leave her umbrella for stray cats caught in the rain under the eaves of the lecture halls. She was too perfect, like a fragile, exquisitely crafted dream. All I could do was watch from a distance. I'd catch glimpses of her profile through the towering shelves of the library. I'd claim the farthest possible seat in the study hall she frequented. When she spoke as the student representative at assemblies, I'd squeeze into a corner in the very last row of the auditorium, looking up at the radiant figure on stage. The closest I ever got was at a campus recruitment event. She was a student assistant, bustling around, handing out brochures to the line I was in. When my turn came, she'd just run out. "Just a moment, I'll go get more from the back," she said, her voice still just as flat. "It's okay. Thanks, I don't need one," I blurted out, practically tripping over myself to get away. I was terrified that if she looked at me for 1 second longer, she'd see the frayed collar of my faded shirt, the poverty and panic hidden beneath my calm facade. I loved her, but the weight of that love was crushing me, heavy with shame. Everything changed at a charity gala. My professor had shoved a ticket into my hand, insisting I go to network and see the world. I was drowning in a rented, ill-fitting tuxedo, hiding in the darkest corner, wishing I could turn invisible. And then I saw her. Ava was wearing a pearl-white evening gown, her hair swept up loosely, revealing the elegant curve of her neck. She looked like a true princess, gliding through the glittering crowd, her smile polite, her movements graceful. But as I drifted closer, I overheard her speaking in a low, unusually sharp tone to some rich kid trying to hit on her. Chadwick, if you have zero interest in a library project for underprivileged children and just want to discuss the value of my necklace, then we have nothing to talk about. The guy, Chadwick, flushed and slunk away. She turned, let out a soft breath, and rubbed her temples, a flicker of exhaustion crossing her face. In that instant, she wasn't the untouchable, flawless heiress. She was just a normal girl who got tired, who was sick of the phoniness. Right then, something deep inside me shifted. Maybe it wasn't just her halo I was in love with. Midway through the event, I stepped onto the terrace for some air and accidentally found her on the phone. Her voice was hushed, laced with a clear anxiety. "Mom, I know the capital chain is broken, but how could Dad?" That was the last chance. "Yes, I'm trying. I've already reached out to Mr. Henderson and Mr. Albright." She stopped cold, whipping her head around and seeing me. A flash of panic crossed her eyes before being replaced by her usual composure. "I'll call you back," she said quickly into the phone and hung up. The air felt thick. "Sorry, I didn't mean to eavesdrop," I stammered. She studied me for a moment, then gave a faint, self-deprecating smile. "It's fine. It'll probably be public knowledge soon anyway." She paused, as if talking to herself, or maybe to me. Sometimes this halo feels more like a gilded cage. In that moment, all her coolness and distance melted away, leaving a raw, real vulnerability. I summoned every ounce of courage I had and said, "If it's a cage, it's one a lot of people would kill for. But if you're a bird, you'll always want to fly." She looked startled, sizing me up again, as if truly seeing me for the first time. "Caleb Stone, from the physics department. I saw that paper you published in Science on new semiconductor materials. It was brilliant." I was stunned. How did she know about me? As if reading my mind, she looked away, her tone becoming a little more distant again. "Professor Davis mentioned you. He said you were the most gifted student he's had in a decade." So it was my professor. A flicker of disappointment passed through me, immediately replaced by a thrill that she had acknowledged me. We actually talked for a few minutes that night, about our studies, about the future. Her words no longer carried that remote superiority, but a heavy sense of responsibility for her family's company. And a hint of worry. As she was leaving, she said suddenly, "Caleb, sometimes I really envy you. You get to fight for something that's purely your own." That sentence was a spark, falling on the dry plains of my heart. In the following months, whispers about the Monroe Corporation's broken capital chain started to circulate, growing louder and more frequent. I saw her less on campus. When I did, she was always rushing, a frown etched on her face, with dark circles under her eyes. She was getting thinner. I threw myself into my studies, my lab work, my projects like a man possessed. I knew I couldn't help her with anything, but there was a fire in my gut. I had to prove something, at the very least, that her envy hadn't been misplaced. Just before graduation, after pulling 3 all-nighters in the lab, I finally produced my first viable prototype. It was 4 a.m. when I stumbled out, exhausted, only to see her on a bench downstairs. She was sitting there alone, hugging her knees, her shoulders trembling slightly. I froze, my heart clenching as if squeezed by an invisible hand. She must have heard me. She looked up sharply. In the dim glow of the lamppost, I could see her eyes were red, with tear tracks still wet on her cheeks. When she saw it was me, she flinched, quickly turning away to wipe her eyes, trying to make her voice sound normal. "Still working this late?" "Yeah." I walked over and sat on the bench, leaving a careful space between us. "The project's on a tight deadline." A heavy silence fell, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the distant hum of traffic. "Caleb," she said suddenly, her voice raw from crying but eerily calm. "I'm getting engaged." My brain went blank. A roar of static filled my ears. "What?" "To Blake Vanderbilt, from the Vanderbilt Group," she said, staring at the dark silhouettes of the trees. Her tone was so flat, she could have been talking about someone else entirely. "Next month. It's a merger disguised as a marriage. Simple. The Monroes need capital, and the Vanderbilts need the last remaining parcel of land and our distribution channels." I whipped my head around to look at her. "Do you want this?" She finally turned to face me. The lamplight caught a faint glimmer in her eyes. The glimmer trembled, then died. She pulled a smile that was uglier than any tears. Does it matter? In that instant, all my passion, all the fragile confidence I had just started to build was shattered by those 3 words. Right? Does it matter? What could I do? I didn't even have a right to say, "I'll take care of you." I clenched my fists, my nails digging deep into my palms. She stood up, smoothed her dress, and regained that familiar, distant calm. "Congratulations on graduating, Caleb. I'm sure you'll have a brilliant future." She turned and walked away, her back so thin in the darkness it looked like it was made of paper. I stared after her until she was completely swallowed by the night. A boulder was lodged in my chest, suffocating me with a dull ache. That night, I sat on the bench where she had sat, all the way until the sun came up. After graduation, I turned down every stable, high-paying offer and chose the hardest path imaginable: launching a startup. My co-founder said I crammed into a converted garage in a cheap suburb, working day and night on R&D, chasing investors. Whenever I hit my limit, I'd think of her smile that was more painful than crying, of her question, "Does it matter?" and I would squeeze out a little more strength. I was rejected by countless VCs, sabotaged by competitors, and betrayed by partners. At our lowest point, the team fell apart, I couldn't make payroll, and I was drowning in hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, carrying it all alone, unable to sleep for nights on end. On the many occasions I felt I couldn't go on, I would drive to the increasingly desolate Monroe Corporation Tower, or later, to the glittering headquarters of the Vanderbilt Group, where her supposed fiancé worked, and I'd just stand there and watch for a while. Then I'd tell myself, "Caleb, you have to be faster. Faster." I was terrified the speed of my success wouldn't catch up to the speed of her disappearance. In the 3rd year, my team finally caught a break. Our new technology had a breakthrough, and we secured our first real round of funding. The company was finally on its way up. The 4th year, Series B, our valuation skyrocketed. I started appearing in the business sections of newspapers, even if it was just in small blurbs. By the 5th year, we were the dark horse of the industry, with a staggering valuation. I had finally earned the right to be on the cover of the nation's top business magazine. The interview was scheduled at my new penthouse apartment. The view was incredible, overlooking half the glittering expanse of the city. The photographer was adjusting the lighting while the famous business journalist, Ms. Jennings, sat across from me with a professional smile. "Mr. Stone, we're so pleased you agreed to this cover story for Forbes. Everyone is dying to know, how did you and your team create this kind of business miracle in just 5 years? What was that journey like for you?" I leaned back on the Italian custom-made sofa, trying to appear relaxed. The sun was fierce outside, reflecting blindingly off the glass curtain wall. 5 years. The journey. All the hardship, the loneliness, the despair that you can't tell anyone about, the one name that got me through all of it. It rolled around on my tongue, but ultimately transformed into a few canned PR-friendly answers. Timing is crucial, but more than that, the team. Before I could finish, my personal cell phone vibrated in my suit pocket. Only a handful of people had this number. My first instinct was to silence it, but the moment I glanced at the caller ID, my blood ran cold. Blinking on the screen was a number I knew by heart, but had never once had the courage to dial. Ava Monroe. Why would she be calling me? After she got engaged, we'd had no contact. I'd heard the wedding was postponed due to the Monroe family's rapidly deteriorating situation, and then nothing. News about her had completely vanished. A powerful sense of dread seized me. I could hear my own heart hammering against my ribs, loud and out of control. The journalist noticed my change in demeanor and gave me a questioning look. "Excuse me," I said, my voice tight as I shot to my feet. "I have to take an emergency call." Almost stumbling, I rushed into my home office and shut the door, sealing out the world. My hand was shaking so badly it took me a few tries to swipe and answer the call. "Hello." The line was dead silent, except for a nearly imperceptible static and a suppressed, difficult breath. My heart was in my throat. "Hello, who is this?" I asked deliberately, keeping my voice soft, as if afraid of startling whatever was on the other end. A few more agonizing seconds of silence. Then a voice, hoarse, weak, but still recognizably hers, came through, each word sounding like it was scraped across sandpaper, exhausting all her energy. Caleb, is that you? It's Ava Monroe. It's me. I answered immediately, my palm instantly slick with cold sweat. What's wrong? I didn't even dare ask, what can I do for you? I heard a low, choked gasp from her end, like she was on the verge of collapse. Then, in a voice that was nearly shattered, held together only by a final thread of dignity, she spoke, her words broken. I'm so sorry to bother you. I know this is incredibly forward, but could you lend me some money? The last few words were so quiet they were almost inaudible. Laced with a sob, she desperately swallowed back down. Lend her money? Ava Monroe, asking me. A series of questions like ice picks slammed into my brain, freezing it solid. The Monroe heiress, so privileged that even the hem of her dress seemed to whisper exclusive, was using this broken, hopeless tone to ask me for money? What happened? My voice was trembling uncontrollably with an urgency I didn't even recognize. Where are you? It's nothing major. She was still trying in vain to sound calm, but the tremor in her voice gave her away. I'm in urgent need of some cash. I'll pay you back, I swear. Tell me where you are. I cut her off, my tone harsher than I'd ever used, a massive wave of panic crashing over me. Something was wrong, very wrong. My tone must have scared her, or maybe her last thread of composure finally snapped. After a moment of silence, she gave me an address. It was in an old, run-down neighborhood on the west side of Oakland, full of dilapidated buildings slated for demolition and a transient population. It was the last place on earth she should be. Don't move. I'm on my way. I hung up, and without a second thought, snatched my car keys and wallet from the desk and bolted out of the office. The journalist and photographer in the living room stared at me, bewildered. Sorry, the interview's off. Something extremely urgent came up. I tossed the words over my shoulder, not caring about their reaction as I flew out the door. The elevator felt agonizingly slow. I shoved open the door to the stairwell and took the steps 3 and 4 at a time, sprinting down. In the garage, I gunned the engine and peeled out. Rush hour was just beginning, the traffic a tangled mess. I weaved through lanes, laying on the horn, earning a chorus of angry shouts. I didn't care about any of it. My mind had only one thought. Faster. I have to get there faster. West Oakland. The crime rate there was notoriously high. Her alone. What on earth had happened to her? Why come to me for money? How had she been living these past 5 years? 1,000 questions boiled in my mind, scalding me from the inside out. The GPS directed me down a narrow, potholed street. On either side were old buildings with peeling paint revealing the red brick underneath. A spiderweb of wires tangled overhead. The street was crammed with small shops selling cheap goods, hardware, and fast food. The smell of grease and the sound of shouting vendors hung heavy in the polluted air. This place, compared to the memory of Ava Monroe in her cashmere dress walking across a pristine Stanford campus, was like 2 different universes. I slowed down, my eyes scanning frantically. The address she gave was a number on this block, but where exactly? My gaze swept past a brightly lit 24-hour 7-Eleven on the corner, its fluorescent glow harsh in the grimy neighborhood. Behind the glass window, a slender figure in a blue employee polo and apron, her back to the door, was struggling on her tiptoes, trying to hoist a heavy case of bottled water onto the top shelf. That figure, my heart felt like it was seized by an icy hand, stopping cold. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screaming against the pavement. I didn't even wait for the car to fully stop before I threw the door open and jumped out. Through the glass, I could see her more clearly now. The oversized blue uniform hung off her, making her look even thinner. The sleeves were rolled up several times, revealing wrists so delicate they looked like they could snap. She was biting her lip, her pale face flushed with exertion, a sheen of sweat on her forehead matting a few strands of hair to her temples. The dark circles under her eyes were deep and stark. It was Ava. It was really her. The once adored heiress who had people to carry her books, the girl whose fingertips radiated an otherworldly elegance, was now wearing a cheap, probably Uniron polyester uniform in a convenience store that smelled of roller grill hot dogs and chemical air freshener. doing grueling manual labor. A white-hot knife plunged into my chest and twisted. The pain was so intense, I bent over, my vision blackening, a wave of suffocation washing over me. She must have felt my intense stare from outside. She paused, then slowly turned her head. Our eyes met. A look of utter shock crossed her face, as if she were seeing a ghost, immediately followed by overwhelming panic, confusion, and a deep, soul-crushing shame. She looked like someone whose last scrap of dignity had been violently ripped away, leaving her naked and exposed. The cardboard box in her hands crashed to the floor with a thud. Several water bottles rolled out, hitting the shelves with dull clunks. Like a startled rabbit, she stumbled backward, her heel hitting the shelf behind her, her body swaying. Her eyes darted around frantically, finally settling on the floor, as if willing it to open up and swallow her whole. Her fingers twisted the rough fabric of her apron, her knuckles white. My eyes burning, I walked toward her, pushing open the heavy glass door. The electronic chime above rang out its cheap, generic welcome. There were no other customers, just the low hum of the refrigerators and the gurgling of the nacho cheese dispenser. I walked right up to her. This close, I could see every detail on her face. The exhaustion, the malnutrition, the pale skin. Her once bright, clear eyes were now like dusty jewels, filled with fear, humiliation, and a nearly numb despair. Mr. Stone, she stammered, her lips trembling, forcing out a formal, grating title. Her voice was a broken whisper. What are you? She couldn't even finish a sentence. The whole of my heart felt like it was leaking a rusty, agonizing pain. I couldn't speak. I just ducked my head and fumbled for my wallet, pulling out all the cash inside, a thick stack of 20s, and then every single one of my bank cards, including the exclusive black card that had arrived just this morning. I shoved them all into her hands. Take these. Take them for now. If it's not enough, I'll get more. The PIN is the last 6 digits of my cell number. Use whatever you need. My voice was raw, trembling with a sob I couldn't control. These pieces of paper and plastic, the symbols of my 5 years of relentless striving, felt weightless and meaningless now. I just wanted to give them all to her, to fill whatever void had swallowed her life. The cool plastic and paper touched her even colder fingers. She recoiled as if burned by a hot iron, as if touched by something filthy, yanking her hand back so violently she almost knocked everything to the floor. Bills and cards scattered everywhere. She staggered back another step, her back hitting the cold shelving unit with a thud. She finally looked up, trying so hard to force a smile that was more heart-wrenching than any sob. I'm sorry, Mr. Stone. Thank you for your kindness. Her voice was light and airy, with the dead calm of someone who had been utterly crushed, a resigned numbness. I don't need this much. She took a deep breath, as if summoning the last of her strength to straighten her thin shoulders, and said each word, clear and cruel, shattering me as much as herself. Maybe back then, I could have been worthy of you, but now, I'm not good enough for you. Boom. My entire world fell apart. Every fantasy I'd had of our reunion, all the longing and insane hard work of 5 years, all the words of comfort and protection I wanted to say, all my own anxieties and insecurities about not being good enough, they were all obliterated by that one sentence, revealing the bloody truth. She remembered everything. She knew everything. So for the last 5 years, I wasn't the only one struggling in an abyss. She had held on her pride as she fell, all the way down until she was shattered, and even now, she felt she wasn't good enough for me. A tidal wave of pain and sorrow crashed over me, breaking through every wall I had. To hell with good enough, to hell with reality, to hell with all of it. The instant the words left her mouth, a second before my own tears could fall, I lunged forward. I grabbed her, pulling her into my arms with all my strength, with all the frustration and longing of the past 5 years, and held her tight. She was terrifyingly thin. Her bones dug into me. She shuddered in my arms as if struck by lightning and instinctively started to struggle. Don't move. I tightened my grip, as if trying to merge her into my very bones. I buried my chin in the crown of her head, my voice a choked, trembling mess, hot tears finally breaking free and falling in her hair, on her neck, making her flinch again. Ava, You idiot. I held her as if I were holding the only beautiful dream from my broken youth, as if I were holding all the unseen struggles, hardships, and obsessions of the past 5 years. I fought like hell. I made myself rich and powerful. I climbed so damn high. I finally got myself onto the cover of that stupid magazine. I was sobbing, each word mixed with salty tears, trying to warm her cold skin. Everything I did, it was for today, so that no matter what happened to you, whether you were rich or poor, on top of the world or in the gutter, I could open my arms without a second of hesitation and just hold you. The body in my arms went from stiff and resistant to limp, finally giving up all its strength. She sagged against me like a leaf that had been drifting in the wind for too long and finally found a place to land. Then, I felt my shoulder grow wet as her own hot tears soaked through my expensive dress shirt. She finally let go. No more suppression, no more forced composure. In my arms, she began to sob like a cornered, wounded animal, a deep, wretched sound of pain that had been held back for far too long. Her sobs started as a low whimper and grew until she was wailing uncontrollably. Her thin arms came up and wrapped around me, her fingers digging into the fabric of my suit jacket, clinging to me like a drowning person to a piece of driftwood. Outside the window was the chaotic, noisy street of West Oakland, neon lights flashing, people shouting. Inside was the small, bright 7-Eleven, the hum of the refrigerators, the gurgle of the nacho cheese. We stood there, surrounded by scattered cash and bank cards, like two children who had been lost for a very, very long time, holding each other in the ruins, crying our hearts out, but finally on the way home. I rubbed my chin against her dry hair, my voice low but firm. Don't be scared, Ava. From now on, I'm here. The embrace, we just stood there, holding each other under the fluorescent lights of the 7-Eleven, like two castaways clinging together in a storm. Her desperate wails eventually softened into low, intermittent sobs, the sound of a child who had been terribly hurt and had finally found their way home. My shoulder was soaked through. Her warm tears seeped through my shirt, a stark contrast to the frantic, pounding pulse in my own chest. The door chimed again. The footsteps that entered were hesitant. Ava's body went rigid, and she instinctively tried to push me away. I loosened my arms slightly, but didn't let go, shifting to shield her from view. A middle-aged man in a work uniform stood by the door, a tired look on his face, probably just off his shift and wanted to buy a pack of cigarettes. He froze when he saw the scene. Money and cards scattered on the floor, the two of us locked in an embrace, clearly having just cried. He looked awkward and bewildered. Sorry. Smokes. He mumbled, his eyes darting away. I kept my composure, though my eyes were still red. Help yourself, I said, my voice as steady as I could make it. The man practically tiptoed to the cigarette display, grabbed the cheapest pack of Pall Malls, scanned it, and fled without waiting for his change, as if terrified of getting involved. The door shut, and the small space was ours again, filled with the hum of the freezer. Ava stirred in my arms, her voice muffled against my chest, thick with congestion and embarrassment. You can let me go now. I slowly released her, but kept a hand on her bony shoulder, worried she might collapse without the support. She kept her head down, refusing to look at me, scrubbing at her face with her sleeve. But the tears kept coming. The shoulder of her oversized blue uniform was dark where my own tears had fallen. I should clean this up, she whispered, her voice frail as she looked at the mess on the floor. The scattered money and cards felt like a silent mockery, a reminder of everything that had just happened. I'll get it. I pressed her shoulder gently, making her lean against a nearby shelf. Don't move. I knelt and silently gathered the scattered bills, smoothing them out, stacking them neatly. I picked up the cards one by one. The floor was cold, but my fingertips could still feel the phantom tremors of her shaking. I put everything back in my wallet, stood up, and looked at her. She was still staring at the floor, her fingers nervously picking at the hem of her apron. What time do you get off? I asked, my voice soft. She seemed surprised by the question, taking a moment before answering quietly. Another 6 hours. I'm on until the shift change at 3 a.m. I'll wait, I said, my tone final. No, you don't have to. She looked up, a flash of panic in her eyes. I can get home myself. It's close. Ava, I said her full name, my gaze calm and steady. Look at me. She met my eyes. Her own were swollen and red, her lashes wet, like the battered wings of a butterfly. You're not alone anymore, I said, enunciating each word. I told you. I'm here. Her lips parted as if to argue, but she just lowered her eyes again, letting out a barely audible okay. For the next few hours, I stayed in the 7-11. She didn't try to work anymore, just silently straightened shelves, refilled the taquito warmer, and wiped down the counter. Her movements were slow, almost numb, like someone running on autopilot after a devastating shock. I sat on a high stool by the window, watching the street outside grow quiet as the night deepened. We didn't speak. A strange stillness settled between us, mixed with the smell of heated food and cleaning supplies. The weight of her immense grief and the sudden, overwhelming reality of my presence left her adrift and left my own heart in turmoil. A few more customers trickled in to buy cigarettes, instant noodles, beer. She tried to maintain a professional expression, but her voice was hoarse and her eyes were evasive. They probably sensed this strange vibe between the shell-shocked cashier and the man in the expensive suit sitting silently in the corner, because they all hurried out. At 3 a.m., another young girl, yawning, came in for the next shift. She jumped when she saw me, her eyes wide with curiosity. Ava spoke a few quiet words to her, then took off the blue uniform polo, revealing a faded, light gray sweater underneath that made her look even more fragile. She picked up a worn-out canvas tote bag from a corner and walked over to me. "We can go," she said quietly. I followed her out of the 7-11. The early morning air was cool and damp, carrying the city's edge-of-night smells of dust and garbage. She hunched her shoulders, not from the cold, but more like a reflexive, self-protective gesture. My car was parked just a few feet away, its sleek lines and polished paint a stark, jarring contrast to the backdrop of decaying buildings. She stopped for a fraction of a second when she saw it, her fingers tightening on the strap of her bag. I opened the passenger door. She hesitated for a moment before ducking inside, moving so carefully it was as if she were afraid of dirtying the expensive leather interior. I got on the driver's side and started the car. The interior lights came on, bathing her in a soft glow that left her nowhere to hide. She immediately turned her head to look out the window, giving me nothing but the tense line of her profile and the fragile nape of her neck. "Address?" I asked softly, opening the navigation app. She named a street, an old, run-down apartment complex built in the late 90s. No specific building or apartment number. I didn't press, just enter the complex name. The car glided smoothly onto the empty, pre-dawn streets. The silence inside was absolute, broken only by the faint whir of the AC and the robotic voice of the GPS. She remained frozen, staring out the window like a statue. I didn't know what to say. "How have you been for 5 years? What happened to your family? What about the engagement?" Every question felt like a knife. I was afraid one wrong word would make her bleed again, so I just drove in silence. Less than 5 minutes later, the GPS announced we had arrived. It was an open complex with no main gate. The buildings were dilapidated, with large patches of paint peeled off the walls. The security doors at the building entrances were rusted, some hanging ajar, revealing piles of junk inside. I pulled over to the curb. She seemed to let out a sigh of relief and immediately reached for her seatbelt. "This is it. Thank you, Mr. Stone. The money. I'll pay it back as soon as." "I'm walking you up," I interrupted, cutting the engine and pulling the key. My tone left no room for argument. "You don't have to." She whipped her head around, her face showing clear panic and resistance for the first time. "Really, it's fine. It's late, you should." I was already out of the car and had walked around to open her door. She stared at me, her eyes a mix of embarrassment, shame, and a faint, hidden terror. After a few seconds of stalemate, she gave in, lowering her head as she slowly got out of the car. She led me into one of the most decrepit buildings. The stairwell was pitch black, filled with the smell of damp mildew and old, spoiled food. She knew her way by heart, starting up the stairs in the dark. I turned on my phone's flashlight. The beam illuminated the cracked concrete steps and the chaotic graffiti on the walls. She lived on the top floor, the 6th. No elevator. By the 3rd floor, she was already breathing heavily. I followed, silently behind her, listening to her labored breaths, my heart feeling like it was being wrung out. We finally reached the 6th floor, a single metal door at the end of the hall. She fumbled in her tote bag for her keys, her fingers trembling so much it took her a few tries to get the key in the lock. With a click, the door opened. A thick, indescribable, stuffy odor hit me. She turned sideways to let me in, never once looking up. My phone's flashlight beam swept across the room. It was a single room, maybe 100 square feet at most. An old metal frame bed with thin, worn-out bedding. A wobbly wooden desk holding a plastic cup, a toothbrush in another cup, and a few open packets of pickled vegetables. A small induction cooktop sat on the floor in a corner next to a few cheap plastic bowls. The walls were stained with large, yellowish-black watermarks. In one corner was a pile of overstuffed woven plastic bags, her entire life's possessions. There were no windows, only a small exhaust fan, which was currently off. The air was so thick it was hard to breathe. This was where she lived. This was Ava Monroe's life now. I held my phone up, the beam of light moving slowly across the cramped, squalid space. Every detail it illuminated felt like a hammer blow to my chest. Finally, the light landed on her face. She was biting her lip so hard it was white, her face as pale as paper in the phone's cold light, her body trembling slightly. She looked like a prisoner awaiting her final sentence. Her once bright, proud eyes were now filled with nothing but gray, numb exhaustion and a kind of resigned despair. I turned the flashlight off. Darkness instantly swallowed everything, hiding the unbearable expression on her face. In the suffocating silence, I heard my own raw voice, trying to suppress a tidal wave of emotion, trying to sound calm. Pack your essentials. You're not staying here tonight. She didn't say anything. In the darkness, I heard her suck in a sharp, tiny breath. Then, a much longer, dead silence. It was a heavy, oppressive quiet, so complete you could almost hear dust motes settling, hear the tiny, suppressed tremor in her breathing. No. Her voice finally seeped out of the darkness, dry, hoarse, a weak resistance from someone pushed to the absolute edge. Caleb, you don't have to do this. I'm fine here. This place isn't fit for a person to live in. My voice was iron, leaving no room for argument as I fought the lump in my throat. I didn't turn the light back on. I didn't want her to see the expression on my face, and I didn't want to force her back under that harsh, exposing glare. Ava, please. The last 2 words were a whisper, laced with a pleading I hadn't even realized was there. The darkness seemed to grant a strange kind of courage, blurring the sharp edges between us. She fell silent again, but I could feel her stare in the dark, feel her tense, resistant posture. I took a fumbling step forward. My fingers brushed against the cold metal bed frame, making a faint noise. She flinched back, as if startled, bumping into something that clattered to the floor. It's okay. I froze, my voice even lower. I don't want you to stay here. Just for tonight. Okay, let's just get out of here first. I heard her take a deep breath, then let it out slowly, a sound of utter exhaustion and a slight give. There's nothing to pack, she said after a long moment, her voice raw with surrender, as if she no longer had the energy to even try to fight. Your ID. Anything important? I pressed, my heart twisting at her tone. There was a rustling sound in the dark. It seemed she was feeling around in the drawer of that wobbly desk. A moment later, she said quietly, Got it. Let's go. I reached my hand out toward her, knowing she couldn't see it, knowing she wouldn't take it, but I held it out anyway. Take my hand. The stairs are dark. She didn't respond, but I heard her hesitant, shuffling footsteps moving toward the door. I backed out of the suffocating room, guiding us by feel until we were in the slightly brighter hallway. She followed, clutching that worn white tote bag to her chest like a shield. By the faint light filtering through the grimy stairwell window, I could see she was still looking down, her expression hidden. One in front of the other, we descended the stairs in silence. This time, I walked a half step ahead of her, using my phone to light the cracked steps, taking each one slowly. Back in the car, the enclosed space enveloped us once more. She was still hugging that bag, curled up in the passenger seat, staring out the window. It was the darkest hour before dawn on the edge of the city. Only a few all-night diners cast a dim, yellow glow, preparing for the day. I didn't ask her where she wanted to go. I just started the car and headed toward the city center. The silence returned, but the tight, anxious energy had eased slightly, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion now that she was finally out of that place. 7. The apartment. Half an hour later, the car pulled up in front of my apartment building. The 24-hour doorman hurried over, respectfully opening my door. His eyes flickered to the passenger seat, to Ava, dressed in shabby clothes, clearly unwell, and a flash of surprise crossed his professionally blank face before he masked it. I walked around and opened her door. She stared at the bright, luxurious lobby, a clear look of intimidation and resistance in her eyes. She didn't move. "Let's get you upstairs." "A hot shower, some rest," I said quietly, trying to make it sound as normal as possible. "We'll figure out the rest in the morning." She looked at me, an expression so complex it broke my heart, then bit her lip and slowly got out of the car. In the elevator, the mirrored walls reflected our images. I was in a tailored suit, slightly wrinkled from a night's events, but still screaming money. She was in a worn-out sweater, cheap pants, and canvas sneakers with frayed edges. Her face was pale, her eyes empty. She looked like Cinderella after the clock struck midnight, trapped in a glass palace in her most wretched form. She stared intently at the ascending floor numbers, her knuckles white as she gripped the strap of her tote bag. With a soft ding, we reached the penthouse floor. I let her out of the elevator, keyed in the code, and pushed open the heavy front door. The apartment was a sprawling, open-plan space, decorated in a minimalist, modern style of cool blacks, whites, and grays. Through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, the city skyline was just beginning to emerge in the dawn light, a breathtaking, hazy silhouette. She stopped in the foyer, rooted to the spot, as if she couldn't take another step inside. The mirror-like polish of the marble floor reflected her timid, out-of-place figure, making her seem even more alien to this world. Slippers. I cursed myself. I rarely had guests, let alone female guests. I hastily pulled a new pair of men's slippers from a closet. They were huge. "These will have to do for now." She changed into them silently. The oversized slippers only emphasized how slender her ankles were, how fragile. I led her through the living room toward the guest suite. "This is the guest room. It has its own bathroom. There are new towels and toiletries in the cabinet," I said, pushing the door open. The room was simple and clean. "You, get some rest. Take a shower, get some sleep." She stood in the doorway, her gaze quickly scanning the immaculate room before dropping to the floor again. Her voice was a whisper. "This is too much trouble." "It's no trouble," I said, my heart aching. "Go on. If you need anything, just call for me. I'll be right outside." She nodded, not looking at me again, and slipped into the room like a silent shadow, gently closing the door. The soft click of the lock turning felt like a tiny needle prick. She was still on guard, even here, even now. I leaned against the cool wall in the living room and let out a long, weary breath. I hadn't slept all night, my nerves stretched taut. Now that the adrenaline was fading, a dull throb started in my temples. I didn't leave. I just stood there, listening to the faint, distant sound of running water from the guest room. I pictured the hot water washing over her cold skin, wondering if it could wash away even a fraction of her chill and despair. A long time later, the water stopped. After another long silence, there were no more sounds. She must have fallen asleep. After a night like that, her body and mind had to be past their limits. I quietly walked to the living room sofa and sat down, though I felt no desire to sleep. Outside, the sky was fully bright, and the city was roaring to life. The Forbes interview, the meetings at the office. I had pushed them all out of my mind. Right now, my world consisted only of the broken, sleeping girl in the next room. I didn't know the details of what she'd been through for 5 years, but the pieces I had, her desperate phone call, the graveyard shift at the 7-Eleven, that decaying, moldy room, were enough to piece together a suffocating story. How did the proud, swan-like Ava Monroe fall so far? What happened with that engagement? Did the Vanderbilts not help her? What about her family? Countless questions swirled in my head, and not a single potential answer brought me any peace. I took out my phone, hesitated for a moment, and then called my assistant. "Andy, Push all my appointments for today and the rest of the week, I said in a low voice, moving toward the far window, away from her room. My assistant was clearly taken aback, but his professionalism kept him from asking questions. Of course, Mr. Stone. Should I give a reason? Or reschedule to? No reason needed. Postpone them indefinitely. I cut him off. And I need you to look into something for me. This has to be completely confidential. I gave him Ava Monroe's name and the name of the old apartment complex she had been living in. Find out everything you can about her situation for the past few years. And all public and non-public information about the Monroe family's bankruptcy, before and after. The more detailed, the better. My gaze fell on the gray sprawl of Oakland in the distance, and my voice grew heavy. Especially anything related to the Vanderbilts. After hanging up, I sank back onto the sofa and closed my eyes exhausted. I knew investigating her past might be an invasion of her privacy, but I couldn't just stand by while she was drowning. I needed to know what happened. Only then would I know how to best catch her as she fell. Sunlight streamed through the windows, filling half the living room with a hollow warmth. The door to the guest room remained shut, silent. I felt like a watchman guarding this vast, cold space, guarding the door behind which she might be trapped in a nightmare. 8. The nightmare. Time crawled by. I don't know how long I was there, maybe an hour or two. I had just started to drift off on the sofa. Suddenly, a short, suppressed scream, the sound of someone fighting their way out of nightmare, came from the guest room. I shot awake, launching myself off the sofa and rushing to her door. Ava. I knocked, my voice urgent. What's wrong? No response. A powerful sense of dread seized me. I didn't think twice. I turned the handle. The door wasn't locked. I pushed it open. Morning light filtered through the blinds, casting striped shadows on the floor. Ava wasn't in bed. She was curled up in a corner against the wall, wrapped tightly in the comforter, only the top of her head visible. Her body was shaking violently, like the last leaf in an autumn wind. She wasn't crying. She was making a sound of pure terror, her teeth chattering. Ava. My heart leaped into my throat. I hurried over and knelt in front of her, afraid to touch her. Did you have a nightmare? She looked up at the sound of my voice. Her face was colorless, her lips bitten raw. Her eyes were wide with a terror that hadn't faded, her pupils dilated, as if she were still trapped in some horrific dreamscape. She looked at me, but her gaze was unfocused, looking right through me at something horrible only she could see. Debt collectors. She forced the words through her teeth, her voice trembling uncontrollably. They were smashing things, throwing paint. My dad. She couldn't go on. She started shaking like a leaf, pulling the comforter tighter around herself and burying her face in her knees, consumed by a physiological tremor born of pure fear. In that instant, I understood everything. The scattered pieces of her story slammed together, cemented by her words, forming the source of her terror. Post-bankruptcy debt collection, threats, and possibly even worse. These shadows had never left her. They were just lying in wait, ready to devour her in her most vulnerable moments. The pain in my chest was unbearable. Without another moment of hesitation, I reached out and pulled her, comforter and all, into a tight, firm embrace. It's okay. I pressed my chin to the top of her head, my arms a vice around her, trying to warm her to stop the shaking. Ava, look at me. Look at me. It was just a dream. It's over. I'm here now. No one can ever hurt you again. I swear it. She went rigid in my arms for a second, then began to struggle more violently, not pushing me away, but with the unconscious, desperate resistance of a cornered animal. Let go. They'll find me here. They'll hurt you too, she babbled, her words broken and nonsensical. Let them try. I practically roared, my arms tightening, pinning her securely in my embrace. My voice was almost savage as I promised, right next to her ear. I'd like to see anyone try to touch you. Ava, look at me. It's Caleb. I'm not one of the monsters from your dream. You're safe here. You are completely safe. My voice finally seemed to penetrate the fog of her terror. Her struggling slowed, then stopped, but her body still trembled. After a long moment, she slowly, tentatively, raised her head. Her wet, terrified eyes met mine. This time, her gaze focused, clearly reflecting my own face. The recognition dawned. She was here, with me. The string that had been pulled taut to its breaking point finally snapped. She gasped, a ragged breath like someone who had just broken the surface after nearly drowning. And then she let out a raw, unfiltered wail, collapsing against me like a terrified child. It wasn't a suppressed breakdown in the 7-11. This was a complete, unrestrained release of every ounce of fear and pain she had been holding inside. She wrapped her arms around my waist and held on tight, her face buried in my chest, sobbing until she was limp and breathless. I held her close, patting her back in a clumsy, repetitive rhythm, murmuring over and over, "It's okay. Let it all out. It's over now. It's over. I'm here." The sunbeam moved across the floor, tracing the silhouette of our embrace. She cried for a long, long time, until her voice was gone and she was completely spent. The wail subsided into quiet, hitched sobs against my chest. Her body was no longer so rigid. The tide of her fear, carried away by her tears, seemed to finally be receding. She remained leaning against me, not moving, her breathing slowly evening out, punctuated by the occasional, involuntary shudder. I said nothing, just held her, feeling the faint warmth from her thin body, feeling a part of me that had been a wasteland for 5 years finally receive a gentle rain. After another long while, she stirred slightly. Her voice was hoarse and almost inaudible, thick with congestion and a deep weariness. "Caleb." I murmured back. "I'm hungry." Those 3 simple, almost childish words were like a faint but clear beam of light, piercing the thick, hopeless cocoon she had wrapped around herself. I responded almost instantly, a sense of relief making my own voice lighter than I expected. "Okay, let's get you something to eat." I carefully loosened my grip. She was still weak, leaning against the wall. Her eyes and nose were red from crying, making her look like a little rabbit caught in the rain. She looked dazed with a touch of embarrassment. She quickly wiped her cheeks with her hand, avoiding my eyes. "I'll see what's in the kitchen," I said, standing up, trying to sound casual. "It'll just be a minute." I left the room, gently closing the door behind me to give her a moment to compose herself. I walked quickly to the open-plan kitchen and pulled open the large, double-door refrigerator. It was mostly empty, bottled water, some beer, fruit, and the frozen ravioli and gyoza my housekeeper had prepared and left for me. Ravioli. It was fast and warm. I put a pot of water on to boil, took the ravioli from the freezer, and washed a few spinach leaves. My movements were a bit clumsy, but I managed. The kitchen soon filled with warm steam. Over the sound of the bubbling water, I heard her door open. She didn't come out right away, and I didn't turn around, pretending to be focused on the pot. A moment later, I heard soft footsteps approaching. She had changed out of her old sweater and was wearing a gray cotton t-shirt I'd left out for her. The shirt was huge on her, like a dress, falling past her thighs and making her look even more fragile. She was barefoot, her toes curled slightly against the cold marble floor. "Put on some slippers," I said with a frown, my eyes glancing at her pale, cold-looking feet. She obediently turned and went to find them. I let out a quiet breath of relief. The fact that she could follow a simple instruction like that was a good sign. By the time she returned, wearing the oversized slippers, the ravioli was nearly done. I tossed in the spinach, turned off the heat, and ladled the pasta into 2 large porcelain bowls. The clear broth, the tender ravioli, the bright green spinach. It was steaming and simple. I set the bowls on the kitchen island and handed her a spoon. She hesitated before sitting on the bar stool next to me. She stared at the bowl of hot food, her eyes a little unfocused, holding the spoon but not moving. "What's wrong? Don't you like ravioli?" She shook her head quickly, then picked up her spoon, scooped one up, blew on it, and carefully brought it to her lips. She chewed slowly, then another and another. She ate quietly but steadily, like someone who hadn't eaten in a long time, or someone trying to absorb the warmth and reality of being alive. I sat next to her and ate too. I didn't have much of an appetite, but the warm food settled the cold knot in my stomach. She finished her bowl quickly, drinking nearly all the broth. When she was done, she put her spoon down, her hands cradling the warm bowl. She kept her head down and said softly, "It was good. Thank you. Are you full?" "There's more." "I'm full," she nodded, still not looking up. The sun was now fully flooding the living room, its brightness almost harsh. The warmth and quiet after the meal caused the intense emotions from earlier to settle, but a new, awkward silence began to fill the space. She stared at the clean countertop. I watched the pale, thin line of her profile. She seemed to be gathering her courage, finally looking up at me. Her eyes were still fragile, but there was a new resolve in them. I can't stay here forever. I've already troubled you enough today. I should. Where would you go? I cut her off, my voice dropping. She was at a loss for words. Her gaze flickered, then dimmed. Right, where could she go? Back to that moldy apartment? There are plenty of rooms here. It's quiet. You can stay as long as you want, I said, looking into her eyes, my tone gentle but firm. Don't feel like you're a burden, Ava. For me, offering you a place to stay is the easiest thing in the world. Her lips moved, about to protest. I spoke first, changing the subject. You haven't had a proper rest in a long time. Your nerves are shot. I'm going to have a doctor come by this afternoon, just to check on you, maybe prescribe something to help you sleep. Okay? I phrased it as a question, but my eyes gave her no room to refuse. The word doctor seemed to trigger something in her. A flicker of resistance crossed her face, but it was overshadowed by a weary powerlessness, the look of someone whose fragility has been seen. She was silent for a few seconds, then gave the slightest nod. Okay, it's settled then. I took our empty bowls to the sink, turning my back to her so she couldn't change her mind. Go get some more sleep. The guest room is soundproof. It'll be completely quiet. She didn't move. After a moment, her quiet voice came from behind me. What about you? Aren't you going to rest? You were up all night too? My hands paused under the running water. She was asking about me. I'm fine. I'm used to it, I said, turning around and drying my hands. I have some urgent work to deal with. I'll be in the office. You sleep. If you need anything, call me, or press the button on the nightstand. To reassure her, I added, I'll be here in the apartment. I'm not going anywhere. She looked at me, as if searching my face for any sign of a lie, but eventually she just nodded, slid off the bar stool, and walked slowly back to the guest room, closing the door behind her. This time, I didn't hear the lock click. I stood there until I was sure she wouldn't come back out, then went into my home office and closed the door. A wave of exhaustion hit me, but I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep. I opened my laptop. An email from Andy was already there, with the subject line Monroe Family, preliminary info. I clicked it open and my eyes flew across the cold, hard text. Monroe Corporation declared bankruptcy 4 years ago after a disastrous investment led to a capital chain rupture. Subsequently exposed for accounting fraud, stock price plummeted, assets couldn't cover debts. Chairman Marcus Monroe, Ava's father, was investigated for white-collar crimes. Charges were eventually dropped due to insufficient evidence, but his health collapsed. Rumored to be convalescing in his hometown, condition poor. His wife, Eleanor Monroe, Ava's mother, suffered a major stroke from the stress. She survived, but was left partially paralyzed, requiring long-term care. The email mentioned scattered reports of aggressive debt collectors and the seizure and auction of all family assets. Regarding the Vanderbilts, there was only a short sentence. The Vanderbilt Group briefly considered an acquisition, but quickly withdrew, offering no material assistance. The engagement between the two families was subsequently broken. There weren't many words, but each one felt like a poisoned needle pricking at my eyes. Bankruptcy, investigation, illness, paralysis, debt collectors, a broken engagement. How in God's name had she survived these past 5 years? Living in that hovel, working multiple jobs, taking care of her sick mother, hiding from loan sharks. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes, my heart squeezed so tight it was hard to breathe. The image of her cowering in the corner, shaking and babbling in terror, flooded my mind. Those weren't just nightmares. That was the hell she had actually lived through. And her words, I'm not good enough for you anymore. What kind of pain was she in when she said that? Rage, grief, heartbreak. The emotions churned in my chest. I snapped my eyes open, grabbed my phone, and called Andy again. Mr. Stone? Andy, I said, my voice tight with suppressed emotion. 2 things. First, find the best private medical team in the city. I need them at my apartment this afternoon. I want internal medicine, neurology, and a psychologist for a full evaluation. Second, find out who has been visiting the Monroe family for the past few years, especially the debt collectors. I want a list of names and everything you can find on them. Fast. Andy was silent for a second, then answered immediately. Understood, Mr. Stone. I'm on it. After I hung up, I still couldn't sit still. I paced my office, my gaze repeatedly drawn to the closed guest room door. She was just on the other side, sleeping, covered in scars I couldn't see, and I had just caught a glimpse of the iceberg beneath the surface. I didn't know how I was going to face her when she woke up. Should I pretend I knew nothing, or... Around 1 p.m., the doorbell rang softly. The medical team had arrived. I opened the door to 4 professionals with calm, steady demeanors, carrying sophisticated medical cases. The leader was a woman in her 50s with a kind face. Mr. Stone, hello. I'm Dr. Evans. Dr. Evans, thank you all for coming, I said, letting them in and lowering my voice. The patient is resting in the guest room. She's emotionally fragile, has been through a significant trauma, so please be gentle. We understand completely. You can count on us, Dr. Evans nodded. I walked to the guest room door and knocked softly. Ava, the doctors are here. A few seconds of silence, then a rustling sound. The door opened. She was standing behind it, having changed back in her own clothes. Her hair was combed, but she was still pale, her eyes filled with the wary anxiety of facing strangers. It's okay, just a routine checkup, I said softly, stepping aside to let the doctors in. Dr. Evans gave her a warm smile. Miss Monroe, sorry to disturb your rest. We're just going to run a few simple checks. Please relax. Ava looked at me. I gave her a reassuring nod. Only then did she step back to let them enter the room. I didn't follow them inside. I closed the door gently, giving her some privacy. The wait was excruciating. I stood by the living room window, watching the endless stream of traffic below, my mind a tangled mess. After more than an hour, the door opened. Dr. Evans came out first, her expression serious. I was instantly at her side. How is she? Physically, it's mainly long-term malnutrition and exhaustion. Some minor stomach issues. All of that can be managed with time and care. Dr. Evans paused, lowering her voice even more. The main concern is psychological. She's presenting clear symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. Her anxiety and depression levels are quite high, and she has a severe sleep disorder. Subconsciously, she's in a constant state of high alert and fear. My heart sank. Is it serious? It will require systematic therapy and medication. And it will take time. We can't rush it, Dr. Evans sighed. She's extremely resistant to talking about the past, very defensive. Just touching on the subject briefly caused a significant spike in her vitals. The most important thing right now is to make her feel completely safe, to build trust, get her nutrition up, and ensure she gets rest. Let her body recover first. I'll prescribe some mild medication to help with her sleep and anxiety. Okay, whatever you recommend, I said, my voice hoarse. We'll put together a detailed follow-up plan. For today, just let her rest and take her medication on time. I'll come by again tomorrow. Dr. Evans handed me a prescription slip and a few pill bottles. The instructions are all clearly written. After seeing the medical team out, I stood there holding the small pills. They felt as heavy as lead. I opened the guest room door. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, head down, hands in her lap. She didn't look up when I came in. She was enveloped in a silent, depressive state of resistance. They're gone, I said, holding out a glass of water and the pills. Take these and try to get some more sleep, okay? She took them without a word, obediently swallowing the pills and drinking all the water. I'll be right outside. I took the empty glass. Try to sleep, please. Still silent, she lay down, turning her back to me and pulling the covers up, curling into a ball. I stood there for a few seconds before quietly backing out of the room. That evening, I had the housekeeper make a simple rice porridge and some light side dishes. Well, I want to get Ava for dinner. She was asleep, probably from the medication. Her breathing was even, but her brow was still furrowed. I didn't wake her. Late that night, after dealing with a few urgent work emails, I still felt uneasy. I tiptoed to her door. It was silent inside. I hesitated, then slowly turned the handle and pushed the door open a crack. A dim night light on the bedside table was on. She was lying on her side, seemingly in a deep sleep, but one hand was clenched tightly around the edge of the comforter, her knuckles white. Even in sleep, she couldn't truly relax. I closed the door gently, a heavy feeling in my chest. The next morning, the sun was bright. When I knocked and went in, she was already awake, sitting on the bed with her knees hugged to her chest, staring out the window. She looked a little better than yesterday, but her eyes were still empty. "Breakfast is ready," I said. "Dr. Evans will be by to see you after." She turned her head, looked at me, and nodded slightly. At breakfast, she was still quiet, but she drank a whole bowl of porridge and ate an egg. Dr. Evans arrived on time. They were in the room for a shorter period this time. When she came out, she told me that Ava was slightly more cooperative, but still avoided the core issues. "One step at a time, Mr. Stone. We can't rush it, Dr. Evans reassured me. After the doctor left, I found Ava not in her room, but standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room. Looking down, the sunlight outlined her thin silhouette, making her look as if she might dissolve into the light. I walked over and stood beside her, not disturbing her. After a long time, she spoke, her voice so quiet it was like she was talking to herself, or maybe to me. "The sky, it looks different than I remember." Her voice was as light as a feather falling on a still lake, but it sent ripples through my heart. It held a dazed, almost childlike confusion, as if she had just woken from a long, terrible dream and couldn't distinguish fantasy from reality. I followed her gaze out the window. The city sky was framed by the building, a hazy blue-gray with a few thin clouds. It looked the same as always. "How is it different?" I asked, my own voice softening, afraid to break the spell of this rare, spontaneous expression of emotion. She was quiet for a moment, then shook her head slightly, as if she couldn't explain it herself. "It seems higher, or cleaner, maybe." She paused, the corner of her mouth twitching in what was less a smile and more a gesture of weary self-mockery. "Maybe. It's just been a long time since I really looked up." My heart clenched. A bitter, sour feeling spread through my chest. She had been so busy looking down, just trying to survive, dodging the glares of creditors, rushing between the aisles of a convenience store, that she truly hadn't had the luxury of looking at the sky. "You can look at it every day from now on," I said, my tone as casual as I could make it. "The view from here is great. The sunrises and sunsets are beautiful." She didn't reply, just kept her gaze fixed on the world outside, her profile almost translucent in the bright light, revealing the faint blue veins beneath her skin. 10. The sound of silence in the days that followed, a strange calm settled over the vast apartment. Ava was still quiet, but her silence was less the hollow despair of before and more unsettled. She started spending more time in the living room, no longer just curled up in the corner. Sometimes she would sit in the armchair closer to me, a book open on her lap, but her gaze would often drift over the pages to some distant, empty point in space. She began to notice me. When I took a work call, she no longer immediately fled, but would pretend to be reading, her fingers unconsciously toying with the corner of a page. When I was working on emails, she would stare out the window for long stretches, then let out a sigh so faint it was like a whisper of down, but it always landed squarely on my heart. Dr. Evan started coming less frequently, from every day to every other day. After each visit, she would tell me privately, her physical stats are improving, which is good. Psychologically, she's still avoiding the core trauma, but her hypervigilance is decreasing. The frequency of nightmares is down. She always added, "The sense of security provided by her environment is crucial, Mr. Stone. You're doing a great job." Am I? All I was doing was instinctively keeping her in my territory, clumsily providing food and shelter, like a miser guarding his long-lost treasure, terrified and unsure. Andy sent over more reports on the loan sharks, on the uglier details of the Monroe bankruptcy, including some murky evidence that the Vanderbilts had kicked them when they were down. I read it all, a cold fire building in my gut, but I kept my face impassive. "Keep an eye on them," I told Andy, "especially the one with a neck tattoo, the one they call Spike. I want to know his every move." I would not let even a shadow of that filth touch her again. The weather warmed, the sun gaining strength. On a beautiful Saturday morning, Light streamed through the windows, painting bright patches on the floor. After breakfast, instead of retreating to her room, Ava stood by the window for a long time, watching the newly bloomed hydrangeas in the building's garden below. I put down my tablet and suggested casually, "It's a nice day. Want to go for a walk downstairs? The flowers are in full bloom." Her body stiffened almost imperceptibly. She whipped her head around to look at me, her eyes instantly filling with that familiar panic and resistance, like a startled deer. "No, that's okay." She refused immediately, her fingers twisting the hem of her shirt. I can see them fine from here." The fear was still a cage around her. She was terrified of going outside, of being seen, of the malice that could jump out from any corner. A pang of disappointment hit me, but I kept my tone light. "All right, the sun's warm in here, too." I didn't push it. I saw her relax slightly, but her gaze on the flowers below held a trace of longing she couldn't hide. That afternoon, I went out and came back followed by delivery men carrying several large boxes. Ava heard the noise and peeked out of her room, a question in her eyes. "Just bought a few things," I said, directing the men. "If you're going to be looking out the window all the time, might as well do it properly." They unpacked and assembled a high-end Celestron telescope and a set of comfortable wicker patio furniture, which we placed on the terrace with the best view. After they left, I went out to the terrace and started adjusting the telescope. Ava followed hesitantly, lingering by the glass door. "Want to try?" I glanced at her. "You can see for miles during the day, and at night, we can look at the stars. The light pollution isn't too bad up here." She hesitated, then slowly walked over. Copying me, she carefully leaned down and peered into the eyepiece. She fiddled with the focus knob, then let out a soft "oh." "What do you see?" I asked. "There's a bird's nest in that tree." Her voice held a note of wonder and a faint, almost undetectable flicker of interest. "And I think there are baby birds inside. They're moving." She stayed bent over the telescope for a long time, as focused and delighted as a child discovering a new continent. From then on, the terrace became her spot. Sometimes during the day, she'd watch the children playing in the garden or the endless flow of traffic on the distant streets. Sometimes at night, I'd show her how to find Orion's belt or Venus. She was a serious student. She still didn't say much, but the lines of her face seemed to soften under the starlight. She started eating a little more, and a faint touch of color returned to her cheeks. The next time Dr. Evans visited, she smiled and said, "It seems a new way of looking at the sky is working wonders." Life flowed on like a slow-moving stream, calm on the surface, but with an undercurrent only the two of us could feel. One afternoon, I was in a tense video conference in my office. The client was a difficult one, nitpicking every clause. My voice grew sharp and commanding, my speech rapid and decisive. In the middle of the meeting, I got up to get some coffee. I pushed open my office door and saw Ava standing right outside. She was holding a glass of water, as if she had been about to bring it to me, but she was frozen in place. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a strange, new kind of fear. She was staring at me. In that moment, I realized she had overheard me on the call. That wasn't the voice I used with her. It was the voice of another Caleb Stone, one who belonged to the corporate jungle, sharp, cold, and aggressive. My stomach dropped. I immediately softened my expression and my voice. "What is it?" My voice seemed to snap her out of her trance. She jumped, her eyes darting to the floor as she shoved the glass into my hand. "Nothing. You've been busy. I thought you might be thirsty." The instant our fingers brushed, I felt that hers were ice-cold and trembling slightly. She practically threw the glass at me and fled back to her room, shutting the door. I stood there holding the lukewarm glass, a heavy feeling in my chest. I had scared her, not the fear of debt collectors, but the fear of me, this version of me she didn't know. She didn't come out for dinner that night. When I knocked, she said through the door that she wasn't hungry. I stood outside her room, my chest tight. I knew that behind that door, the fragile sense of security she had started to build was probably crumbling because of what she'd overheard. I had to do something. I didn't bother her again. Instead, I went to the kitchen. I found some cocoa powder and marshmallows the housekeeper had stocked, looked up a recipe on my phone, and clumsily started making a rich hot chocolate. I knew she liked sweets. She was always looking at the cakes in that bakery near campus. I poured the passable hot chocolate into a white porcelain mug, carefully placed it on the floor outside her room, and knocked softly. Ava, I made some hot chocolate. It's outside your door. Have some if you get hungry. No reply. I retreated to the living room, turned off most of the lights, and sat waiting in the dark. A long time later, her door creaked open a crack. A slender hand reached out, quickly retrieved the mug, and the door clicked shut again. I leaned back on the sofa, feeling a little bit of the tension leave my body. I don't know how much later it was. I was almost asleep when I heard the faintest of footsteps. I opened my eyes. She was standing in front of the sofa, wearing my oversized t-shirt barefoot, holding the now empty mug. The soft light from a single lamp outlined her thin frame. Her eyes were a little puffy, but her gaze wasn't fearful anymore. It was filled with a complex, hesitant light. She looked at me, her voice a tentative whisper, as if afraid to break the silence. Caleb. The way you were. In the meeting, she paused, struggling to find the words. Is it always that hard? There was again that question, but this time it was deeper, more specific, aimed directly at the cold, unfamiliar version of me. I didn't answer right away. The darkness amplified everything. I could smell the faint, sweet scent of chocolate from the mug, mixed with her own clean, soap-like fragrance. I sat up straight and patted the empty space on the sofa next to me. She hesitated, then slowly came over and sat down, keeping a slight distance, placing the empty mug on her lap and picking at its rim with her finger. Sometimes it is, I said, my voice calm, my gaze fixed on a point in the darkness. It's like a chess match or a war. You have to calculate every move. You can't retreat, because one step back could mean total disaster. She listened silently, her fingers stilling on the mug. A lot of people depend on me. Andy, my employees, our investors. I continued, the words flowing more easily than I expected. I'd never said this to anyone. I can't fall and I can't lose. So sometimes I have to be harder. I turned to look at her. She was already looking at me, her eyes shining in the dim light. But that's just a mask or a weapon, I said, my voice low and serious. It's for dealing with the outside world. It's not for you. Her eyelashes fluttered violently. I know, she whispered, looking down. For a second, you seemed so far away. Her voice held a hint of hurt, of being scared. My heart felt like it was soaking in warm water, aching and soft. Never. I reached out, slowly, and covered the hand on her lap with mine. Her fingers flinched but didn't pull away. Her skin was cool, my palm was hot. Ava, no matter what I'm like out there. I squeezed her hand, feeling the delicate bones. Here with you, I'll always be the same guy from the library. The one who was afraid he'd tarnish you just by picking up your book. That sentence was the key. It unlocked everything. She looked up, her eyes instantly welling with tears. Her lips trembled, as if a dam of emotion had finally broken. Tears streamed down her face, silent and steady. Then she squeezed my hand back. It was a faint, trembling pressure, but it was an answer. Outside, the city was asleep. Inside, we sat in the dark, holding hands, like two lost souls who had finally found each other in the endless night. I didn't speak, didn't try to comfort her. I just held her hand and let her cry. I knew these tears weren't from fear or despair anymore. They were washing away the ice, revealing the soft, wounded heart beneath. After a long time, her crying subsided into soft sniffles. She pulled her hand away, embarrassed, and wiped her face with her sleeve. The hot chocolate was really good, she said, her voice hoarse and thick. Good. I'll make it for you again, I said. She made a soft sound, stood up, and took the empty mug toward the kitchen. She paused, and without turning around, her quiet voice floated back to me. You should get some rest, too. Then she walked quickly back to her room and closed the door. This time, she left it open a crack, a thin line of warm light spilling into the hallway. I sat alone in the living room for a long time, just looking at that line of light. My palm still felt the ghost of her cool touch, the memory of her faint, answering squeeze. The long night, I knew, was finally giving way to a real dawn. After that night, things quietly, irrevocably changed. She remained quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet. Not the empty silence of self-preservation, but the quiet of land after a spring rain, with new life stirring just beneath the surface. She started doing small things. She insisted on loading the dishwasher after meals. She folded the blanket she used on the sofa neatly every morning. Once, when I had a cold, she looked up a recipe and brought me a steaming mug of hot tea with honey and lemon. Her eyes were downcast, the tips of her ears pink. "It's probably not very good," she'd mumbled. "It was too sweet, and the lemon slice was clumsy, but I drank every last drop." The hot, sweet liquid warmed me from the inside out. When she saw the empty mug, the corner of her mouth curved up in the barest hint of a smile. It was so fleeting, so fragile, it took my breath away. A month later, Dr. Evans's smile was genuine. "Her recovery is better than expected, Mr. Stone. The core trauma will still take time, but she's rebuilding her connection to the world. That's the most important thing." Meanwhile, Andy's file on the loan sharks grew thicker. Their movements, their associates, even some of their other illegal activities. The leader, Spike, was a nasty piece of work, vicious and connected. Rage simmered in me day and night, but I held it in check, waiting for the right moment. I didn't want to just warn them off. I wanted them gone, erased from her life so completely that not even a shadow remained. The moment came sooner than I expected. It was a Friday evening. The setting sun painted the city in warm gold. I was just about to ask the housekeeper to make a few of the dishes Ava had started to enjoy when my phone rang. It was Andy. Mr. Stone, his voice was tight, unusual for him. "Spike's crew, they're back in that neighborhood where Miss Monroe used to live. They're asking around for her. It sounds like they heard someone took her in, and they're not happy about it." My blood ran cold. My knuckles turned white around my phone. "Where are they now?" "Right below her old building. They're hassling some of the old ladies. Keep eyes on them." "I'm on my way," I said, hanging up. The rage in my chest was a cold, sharp point. I turned and saw her standing in the doorway of my office. She was holding an empty water glass, her face as white as a sheet, her body trembling, her eyes wide with a terror I recognized instantly. She had heard. "Caleb," her voice was a ragged whisper. "Are they?" "It's nothing." I cut her off, striding over to her. I gripped her cool, trembling shoulders, my gaze steady and firm. "Listen to me, Ava. Stay here. Lock the door. Don't go anywhere, and don't open it for anyone but me. Trust me, I can handle this." She looked up at me, fear warring with something else in her eyes. Her lips trembled, unable to form words. "Trust me," I repeated, my tone leaving no room for doubt. She looked into my eyes, at the calm, hard resolve there, and the tide of her fear seemed to be held back by a stronger force. With a great effort, she controlled her shaking and gave a sharp, jerky nod, a single tear of pure terror and trust rolling down her cheek. I reached up and swiped it away with my thumb. "I'll be back." I turned and walked to the door, grabbing my jacket and keys without breaking stride. The car tore through the evening traffic like a predator. My face was a calm mask, but my eyes felt like chips of ice. The GPS was set for that decaying neighborhood in Oakland. On the way, Andy gave me updates. I gave my instructions, my voice clipped and precise. "Call the police. Report a public disturbance, armed intimidation. Anonymously send the lead officer the files we have on their prior offenses. I want them in custody tonight, and I don't want them getting out anytime soon." Understood. When I reached the familiar, grimy alley, I saw them. A group of thugs surrounding a terrified old woman. At their center was Spike, his neck tattoo stark against his skin, his face a mask of aggression. I swung the car sideways, blocking the alley, and got out. The sudden roar of the engine and the appearance of the luxury car silenced them. Spike squinted at me, a mixture of suspicion and a bully's instinctive caution in his eyes. "Who the hell are you?" he snarled. I ignored him, my gaze going to the frightened old woman. My voice softened. "Ma'am, it's all right. You can go home now." She scurried away into a nearby building as if granted a pardon. Spike, enraged at being ignored, stepped right up to me, his voice a spray of spittle. "Hey, I'm talking to you. Mind your own damn business. I'm looking for the Monroe girl. She owes us money. Pay your debts." I finally let my gaze fall on him. It was cold, dismissive. "How much does she owe you?" He was taken aback, but recovered quickly, spitting out an outrageously inflated number. I took out my checkbook, wrote the amount without flinching, signed it, and tore it out, holding it up. Here's your money. Give me the IOU. My voice was flat. Spike stared at the check, then at me, greed and suspicion warring on his face. One of his goons reached for it. I pulled my hand back. The IOU. Spike spat on the ground and pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his leather jacket. Give me the check, you get this. Throw it on the ground, I said. His face darkened. You son of a... I said. I interrupted, my voice quiet but carrying a chilling pressure. Throw it on the ground. Maybe it was my demeanor. Maybe it was the lure of the money. Spike cursed, but he tossed the paper into a puddle of grimy water at his feet. Only then did I toss him the check. He snatched it up, his eyes wide with greed as he confirmed the number. At that exact moment, police sirens wailed in the distance, growing rapidly closer. Spike's face changed. He knew he'd been played. He turned to run. I was faster. I kicked out a sharp, brutal blow to the back of his knee. He screamed and collapsed, the check flying from his hand. His crew started to move, but Andy and a couple of security guys I kept on retainer materialized, blocking their path as squad cars screeched to a halt, boxing us in. Officer, these are the men, Andy said, approaching the lead cop and handing him a flash drive. Public intimidation, violent loan sharking, the evidence is all there. And that one, he pointed at Spike, who was now being handcuffed, just attempted to assault this gentleman. Spike struggled, his face contorted with rage as he was hauled to his feet. He glared at me. You set me up. You're dead. You hear me? Dead. I watched, my face impassive, as he was shoved into the back of a police car. I bent down and picked the crumpled wet IOU out of the puddle, carefully smoothing it out and placing it in my pocket. The sirens faded. The crowd dispersed. Andy came over. It's done, Mr. Stone. The evidence is solid. They'll be gone for a long time. Good. I nodded, my eyes sweeping over the oppressive, decaying street. I don't want anyone around here ever mentioning Ava Monroe's name again. Clean it up. Understood. I got back in my car. Only when the window was up, sealing me in, did I allow myself to lean back and release a long, slow breath. My hands were still clenched tight on the steering wheel. Not from fear, from a rage so deep it felt cold. Rage that they had been the source of her terror. Now it was over. I drove back to the apartment, back to the light I knew was waiting for me. I opened the front door. The living room was lit by a single, warm lamp. She was curled on the sofa, just as I'd asked, and shot up the moment she heard the door, her eyes wide like a frightened deer's. When she saw it was me, the fear vanished, replaced by a raw, desperate concern. She ran to me, barefoot, stopping just in front of me, her eyes scanning me up and down. Her voice was strained. Are you okay? It's over, I said, my voice hoarse. I took the smoothed-out IOU from my pocket and held it out to her. It's all taken care of. No one will ever use this to hurt you again. She stared at the familiar, nightmarish piece of paper, then slowly looked up at me, her eyes filled with a disbelieving shock. Her gaze darted from my face to the paper and back again. Her hand trembled as she reached out and took it. The moment her fingers touched it, she flinched, but then her hand closed around it, her knuckles white. She stared down at the IOU for a long, long time, her shoulders beginning to shake. I thought she was going to cry. She didn't. She looked up, her eyes tear-free but blazing with a fierce, complex emotion, like a torch suddenly lit in the ruins of her despair. She took a step forward and grabbed the front of my jacket, her fingers digging in. Caleb. Her voice was raw, but it held a strength I'd never heard before. Those 5 years. How did you do it? It was the third time she had asked me. But this time, it wasn't a question of confusion. It was a question of deep, painful, shared understanding. I didn't answer with words. I just pulled her into my arms and held her tight. This time, there was no hesitation, no fear, no struggle. She wrapped her arms around my waist and held me back just as tightly, burying her face in my chest. We stood there, wrapped in the warm light like two trees after a hurricane, finally leaning on each other, our roots intertwined. I could feel her heart hammering against my ribs, and she could feel mine, a frantic, powerful rhythm confirming that we were both real, both here. After a long time, Her muffled voice came from my chest, still thick with emotion, but clear. Caleb, yeah, let's start over. She paused, as if gathering her courage, then hugged me tighter, her voice a whisper, but filled with a resolve that could move mountains. Not because you saved me, not out of gratitude. It's because I think I'm finally starting to be good enough for the man you are now. My heart felt like it had been struck, a wave of ecstatic, aching relief washing over me, drowning all my senses. I lowered my head, resting my chin on her hair, inhaling her clean, familiar scent. My voice was low and rough. You idiot. It was never about being good enough. It was about me finally catching up to you. Outside, the city lights glittered like a river of stars. And inside, our embrace cast a single, inseparable shadow on the wall. The long night was over. The dawn was here.